So basically, what I read was that a lot of single-use plastic is produced in industrial river and it is part of during transportation and no and a lot of these plastic are lightweight, they float around, and they are across the ocean. So they tend to gather up in very specific places like tires and get them on the Pacific, the Jordan, and the southern side of the gyre, where there's a 5 million ton. It's basically a huge plastic of that. And because of that, it is impacting the aquatic life there because of the marine animals. They think plastic is similar to their food, but they eat, for example, the turtles, right? The turtles, they think that the plastic protein is jellyfish that is part of the diet. And they eat it, they digest stuff. And similarly, fishes and crustaceans, they eat it. And that is impacting their food chain and their like when the plastic goes in, their digestive tract because the research showed that they dissected a lot of dead turtles and most of them had plastic in the stomachs, and that was completely blocking their stomach intestine there or damaging the lining of the stomach, and that is why it was affecting their growth, development, and causing stress disorders.
Thank you. Oh, it should be fresh in your kitchen. Yes.
Taking the point which I found really interesting. Plastic pollution. 6.3. Basically 90% of it has ended up in water. It is बिल्कुल नहीं सोचा कि इतना सब interesting fact. One was that the bottled water we drink it contains more microplastics than tap water itself. But the problem is tap water itself is contaminated, so it's a difficult choice here which should we drink. And secondly, I was also reading that when we wash synthetic fiber clothes, it releases microfibers into the drainage, and that it somehow ends up into the sea.
Yeah. So, yeah, all that is true. Anything else? I think something is wrong. Yes.
Also, when there is this study where microplastic can end up in our water sources, and when we make it, the species get it inside the brain as it passes through our blood-brain barrier, and then it hinders our cognitive.
Yeah. So I saw that a lot of you also wrote about microplastic. Does anyone want to talk about microplastic? They're written about microplastic. Anybody hasn't spoken? So I can start with what sort of intrigued me about microplastic myself. So when I went to the UK, which is 2013, Europe and most of the European Union countries were phasing out microplastic. And I had worked a lot in wastewater treatment, but I didn't know that microplastics can escape that treatment process. And so I was really intrigued by it, and I started studying microplastic. And I also wanted to see how they are going to now phase out microplastic from their chains, which are already established. So, for example, at the time, the toothpastes and the scrubs, face scrubs, etc., that we used to have microplastics. So that microplastic is called primary microplastic. It already is less than 5 millimeters in size, and it is entering the environment as microplastic itself. Then there's other, which is called secondary microplastic, where all of these single-use plastic and everything gets used, which is microplastic, degrades, weathers, changes, breaks down, and becomes microplastic. So that's secondary microplastic. So for me, I think it was really interesting that even though I was super aware about plastic pollution in general, I had never heard of microplastic pollution. I'd heard of secondary microplastic pollution, but not really in those terms. And that is when I got to know about it. So since I have come back, because it is released into the environment after wastewater treatment, microplastic is something that I've started working on in the lab. So in the first student that I supervised, she sort of looked at the interaction of microplastic with bacteria in the environment. So that's what we studied with the biology department here. And her name is Summer. She's a TA. She was TA last year, so she also got to present her work as well. Okay, anybody else before we move to the lecture? Yeah, can you please put your name cards in front of you because that would help now very, very much. Yes, Asher and Alexander.
Now, microplastics also bioaccumulate across the food chain in that first the planktons eat them and then they keep on accumulating, and when they reach humans, they enter in large quantities.
Yeah, so the concept of bioaccumulation also applies to microplastic or plastic as a solution as it does to other chemicals that we studied. Yes,
I
it.
just want to add a point that how the seabirds, 1 million seabirds, specifically plastics at home, and the incineration of plastic, even it has a huge impact on the air, which is the atmosphere. So even if we want to, eliminate plastic, it has its consequences on the planet.
Amazing. Thank you. Yes. So you talked about, some of you talked about the impact on the biosphere, some of you talked about the impact on the hydrosphere, and then also that and how that then impacts the biosphere. You did not particularly mention how microplastic is able to travel through the atmosphere as well. So you must have come across a lot of articles talking about how microplastic is now being found was detected on the top of Mount Everest or in the Arctic or in the deepest oceans. And so the point that I think I want you to learn before we start this discussion is that it's not important. It doesn't matter where we are or what the anthroposphere is, but these pollutants have managed to go to places that are far, far away from human interaction. Whether that has been through atmosphere or through hydrosphere, because the water is then able to take it, or through some of those impacts that we studied, like the grasshopper effect, where a pollutant is able to fly and then settle down and then fly again, and eventually make it to one of those places where even a human wouldn't ever go, or most human wouldn't be able to go. So yeah, so thank you for taking part in that, and I hope it was a useful exercise. Today we'll come back to lecture 7 and 8, and the reason being, in the industry visit, I realized that I skipped some slides, and it would have been nice had I brought it to the group that went earlier, because a lot of these things were mentioned. I think you're at an advantage because the packaging, of course, includes a lot of plastic, and so when you walk in, you'll already know what are the types of plastic, what their hazards are, so you'll probably be in a better position to talk about some of the hazards that the industry might cause. But when I was talking about industries and the processes, in your lecture on renewable and non-renewable energy, I just put an example, and this is also in your book, by the way, where you just have to look at what the entire process is. So how do you start with, exploring coal, digging coal, taking it out, transporting it, bringing it to the industry. But then within the industry, then it's not just burning it and being done with it, right? You take it through to run the turbines, you actually have to burn it, boil the water, make sure the turbines are run, generate electricity, transfer it, store it. But there's also another side where now you have to cool down the water. And now you have to make sure that the pollutants that are coming out because of burning of fossil fuel are taken care of. So all of that, this particular point, I think I'll keep talking about toxic ash or flue gases or exhaust. All of that technically refers to the toxic compounds that are coming out, which essentially are SOx's, NOx's, and all those things that we studied in the lecture about air pollution. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what I mean when I say industry and the processes and the different steps that are involved in an industry. And I think because we had studied air quality and some of the air pollutants, I thought it might be worth putting with reference to the how we monitor environmental quality. We essentially just use this filter which is gridded, and it's called Ringelmann scale. And when we look at the standards that are there for air quality, this is the scale that is being used. So they will just look at the opacity of it and will say, super, so maybe up to 40% is acceptable, but past that not, but it depends on where in the world are you living. Maybe there are countries that consider this safe and this unsafe, and then there are countries that consider this safe and this unsafe, and we'll look at what Pakistan thinks is okay air quality or within the permissible limits. So just wanted to give you a sense of that. And with respect to the industrialism, I think it would also be important to, because some of us, when we went there, we left the space with a terrible headache. And it's because the place was super noisy. And of course, there are other ways to look at it, for example, the energy, the exhaust, particularly the heat. But then I think mostly it was the noise that was there, that continuous hammering, wanting to shout at one another when we wanted to even say something. And I think when we walked, almost all of us walked with a terrible headache, which then, and some of us did ask these questions as well when we were there, which is about the occupational health and safety. So a lot of these industrial processes are very, very unhealthy for people who work in those industries. And then it comes back to the marginalized who are exposed to pollution because they don't have a choice. So we have a choice between choosing a healthier work compared to someone who's not as skilled and then ends up doing that. Okay, so and then in terms of NEQs, 85 decibels or the busy city traffic is as loud as you're allowed, or the government allows generally, but we will look at even within that noise pollution, there's only a certain hours during which you should be exposed to those levels, not more than that. So 85 decibels doesn't mean that you have to wake up and sleep with 85 decibels. It just means that's the threshold and you shouldn't go past that for a longer amount of time. Okay, and then back to what is the relationship between energy and environment. So why were we concerned about renewable, non-renewable? I think it's because eventually it comes back to our safety and our health, and because we are impacted by it, and then eventually our environment is impacted by it. So it's important that we save both the environment by saving those, and then we save ourselves by making sure that the pollutants that are carcinogenic in nature are going to impact our lungs, are going to impact our skin, are phased out, and the fuel is cleaned and then brought into the setup. But in terms of control, and we will hopefully study it later in the course as well, the first step to making sure that we do not pollute the environment much is using the fossil fuels efficiently. And I will keep saying this, and I do have a problem with, for example, sitting in rooms that are chilled. We do not need to sit in rooms that are chilled because we know what the temperature is outside. We just need like a room temperature where all of us are happy and not stressed when we're operating, but we definitely do not need chilled rooms. So I think the first step is becoming efficient, making sure that all of the fossil fuel isn't just, okay, we do not have an alternative resource right now, but whatever resource we have, how are we utilizing that is also really important. So for example, a lot of cars in Lahore are fuel inefficient, which then leads to environmental pollution. So I think the first step is first of all making the source clean, so cleaning the fuel, then making all the processes energy efficient, so that we know that instead of using 10% more, we're now using 20% less. So something along those lines, and then eventually, of course, being able to switch to renewable resources, which we talked about. And this is just, I think, because we talked about electromagnetic radiations, I find when I was studying the applications of infrared, in our lives, it's impressive. So for example, one of the courses that I studied in my undergrad was forensics and how to trace a certain crime using these environmental signals. And so for example, if a person was present at a scene of crime, if they walked past that space, that we could take the soil out of their boots and find the pollen or that certain composition at the scene of crime and compare it with that. So it's not just like the fingerprints, there's so many other signals that you can take from the environment as well. And then during that time, I learned about the infrared cameras and how these cameras can capture in the dark and are super useful in environmental applications, from the human side. But then if you look at this, and also, of course, I told you about the geographical information system and how the radiations are used to understand the Earth better. This is just basically an infrared camera looking at a building, trying to find the leaks. So wherever there are heat losses, this camera will just tell you through the infrared radiations what the leaks are like. So they're very simple tools available. Although like the first step is you're heating the room and also have some windows open, it would be nice to make sure that it's insulated. But because we were talking about efficiency, I thought it might be worth putting this in front of you so that you can start thinking about it. And then this is one of my most favorite topics in environmental sciences, because we talk about scales and we talk about pollution, we talk about its impact on all the spheres, but very seldom do we talk about these little things, these little gadgets, these little luxuries that we've added in our life, and what its impact is going to be on our health as well as the health of the people who are around us. So last time it didn't go well because I was saying if someone's smoking right next to you, throw them out of the room, and then turns out one of my students' father smokes, and then it didn't go really well. And then for another person, his brother was sitting in the room and smoking near the window. So it was in a way funny, but I think the reason why I like to quote this again and again is again to bring that big scale to a very, very, very small scale and say that smoking is not just injurious for the person who's smoking, but also research shows that passive smokers or people who are on the other side get impacted more because what is released is more toxic than what is inhaled. Because there's a filter here that kind of takes everything filtered to the smoker. But if you're sitting right next to them and thinking, oh, it's absolutely okay for me, you're actually at a bigger risk than they are because you're at the unfiltered side of the street. So there's a lot of research on active smoking. Of course, active is not good either, but if you're just lying around these people who are smoking and thinking, it's okay for me to be hanging out with my friends, it's actually not. And why I like to quote this is because it helps us scale environmental pollution and its impact on people and how certain people are impacted more than the others. So the industry that is emitting is, when it emits it, it's going away from the industry. And so people who end up being impacted are people who live close to those industries or people who are not a party to actually contributing to the pollution. So which is why like environmental tobacco smoking is one of the components that I like to highlight in my course. Back to coming to this, and again, I think it was important because you will visit an industry, then you'll have to think about its energy. So for example, you looked at that one house with an infrared camera and were able to see the leaks. But then if you now sit and look at how much electricity is coming in and how much net energy is actually utilized and what are the losses, they would help you become efficient. So how much electricity is coming into this room, how much is actually converted into electricity, how much is exhausted as heat or extra things, that you can create that energy flow diagram, which will help you find the root cause of what problem. Even if it's more at the transportation side or more at the source side, it should help you find out that, hold on, our energy flow diagram doesn't make sense because this facility is way, way far. And by the time it reaches here, a lot of energy has already been lost. So automatically your energy flow diagram will be super inefficient. But it's essentially looking at the entire process, all the energy that it takes, and then finding out what's going on. So, right, I think we did that already. So what do you think has changed for plastic consumption in Pakistan? Because yesterday, the day before yesterday, I was looking at Pakistan Bureau of Statistics report for August 2021, and the numbers for plastic were alarming. So what do you think? How do you think has plastic consumption changed over time in the past 1 year? Yes, Fatma. Yeah, so Fatma is actually an optimist, so she has a positive story to add that the straws are not being changed to paper, which is a good thing. Yes.
I'm planning on polythene bags now. Specifically, DA say you won't find even a single shop to get chocolate देंगे polythene bags. Now they ask you to use या either आप अपने cloth के bag ले आए या use the biodegradable.
Okay, awesome. So there is a ban on single-use plastics. Ali is also saying that you do not really find polythene bags apart. PVC में तो बिक रहे होते हैं, मतलब फ्री में दे जी. Polythene bags, I couldn't hear the rest. They are very, very bad. So we're going to be talking about it today. Yeah. Yeah. So you're saying if I environment friendly packaging, is that what you're talking about? Okay, so sorry I cannot hear some of you very well, so if I misinterpret it, it's on the distance.
Ma'am, मुझे environment friendly वाली कई examples नजर आ रही हैं, तो that's like a very small part of the bigger picture. किसी government देख रहे हैं, आप बाकी शहर में नहीं देख रहे, ये चीज नहीं है, वो इस्लामाबाद है, वो policy तक like वो अपने bags वगैरह को और वही वाले bags use कर रहे हैं, वो भी follow it after like.
Yeah.
So I think कि कभी भी काफी ज़्यादा expensive.
हाँ. आप हाशिया ने बात की थी about these fabric plastic blends. So आपको अब जो shops में ये bags मिलते हैं, they're actually a blend of cloth and plastic. So it's not plastic free. It's not polyethylene, but it's like a blend of plastic and cloth. So it's not completely environment friendly either. And in fact, because we were talking about microplastic, जब इसके छोटे टुकड़े भी environment में जाएंगे, तो they would count as microplastic. They wouldn't count any less damaging because they have a little more percentage of cloth. Of course, that part would degrade, but the plastic is going to remain in the environment as microplastic. So sometimes, like this, greenwashing has to make sense to us. I think, as someone who's really been involved in banning single-use plastic and trying to phase it out, I think that everything that we've done, all this struggle about reducing single-use plastic, it just went down the drain once COVID hit. And it's because everything you use, your face masks, so your face masks also essentially are plastic and fabric, right? So and they're single-use. You cannot use them forever, which means that if you just create a footprint of since COVID, how many face masks have you used? That would tell you the scale of pollution that is associated with single or 2-3 times use, but single is worst because it's only used for a very short duration. And so I may not be the best, the most qualified person in the room to explain economics, but what this graph basically, what this table actually says is that in July, between July and August, there was an increase in plastic. So while we see a lot of these positive steps happening, in terms of import, Pakistan imported, I think, 50% more plastic compared to July in August, which for me is really alarming because also, and then if you look at this, so we have studied the non-renewables. These are the list of products that were imported in Pakistan in the past month, and all of them are, super unhealthy, maybe except for medicine, which is our need, and palm oil. You have the natural gas, the petroleum, and petroleum products. And then plastic, which is also sort of related to that. And even machinery, which is also particularly related to that. So I just want you to also think about, sometimes you hear these 1, 2, 3 inspiring stories and you think a positive change is coming. But when you go back and look at the big numbers, they actually tell you the opposite, that we're not only now generating more emissions, we're also importing products that are more costly and are contributing more to the environment. Yes, I know. So, maybe this is between July 2021 and, oh, okay. Yeah, so maybe I didn't take the right table, but basically between July 21 and August 22, there was a 15% increase. So maybe ignore this table for now, but between July 21 and August 2021, there was an increase in plastic consumption. Okay, and I only came across this yesterday, so I thought it might be worth sharing with you. But like I said, I'm not the most qualified person to explain this to you. So let's go back to why we had to look at this distillation process and find out that the crude oil is, it's useful because it's giving us so many things that we need in our life, but it's also very, very damaging for the environment. So just, for example, looking at ignoring all of those, we said last time that naphtha is the raw material for plastic. And when you actually go to packages, they'll tell you where do they get their plastic from. And one of the companies that they mentioned that they import their plastic from is the company that we have mentioned in the class already. Does anyone who went to the industry on second remember what name it was that they import the plastic granules from to make plastic? No? They were involved in like an oil spill. No? Yes. So the packages actually imports plastic from there. That was already an alarm. I didn't say anything there. But they also told you like majorly Pakistan imports from here. And again, I think I want you to think about how we are also importing pollutants for the environment, for our own uses and convenience, of course. But what is plastic? Plastic is these hydrocarbons, so carbon, hydrogen, oxygens, different combinations. And they're called polymer because there are a lot of them. So, a lot of them are brought together to form these chains. Independently, for example, this is polyethylene. So you have, this is not good. This is probably PET. And then, you have n numbers of that plastic just forming bigger chains, which are then used to make plastic. So you will hear these terms interchangeably. Some people will call it polymer, some people will call it plastic. It's essentially those hydrocarbons in n number of chains, which will be hundreds, thousands, or millions, or billions. And the fun thing about this is that plastic actually was and still is, I think, a brilliant luxury and an invention in itself of how it revolutionizes so many things. So from driving our cars with those tires that are made of plastic to the roads that are made of, combinations of plastic products, and to maybe these food products that are packaged and their shelf life is increased. Plastic was considered one of the greatest inventions until we are now getting to see all of these problems that we get to see in the environment. So I just wanted to summarize how it started. So when Asad said that since 1950, a lot of this has increased, I think it's because polyethylene or polyethylene terephthalate or PET, they were kind of discovered around this time. So they're not too old. They are very new. which is why we should be more worried than we are. They haven't been lying on the shelves forever. It's just these 50 odd years that they've been around. And they have practically found their space in even the space stations, I guess. They're basically like everywhere. Wherever you go, you find these materials in one way, form, or shape, or another. And sometimes it's because we have taken them there. So we have taken these products. So for example, all these tires, the dust that comes out of their tires is microplastic pollution that is coming into that environment to us. So if that water, like if groundwater washes that dust into a water body nearby, then we have added that microplastic dust. But it started with natural materials. So it started with cellulose-based materials. It was important. Then that was substituted because the population increased, the needs and demands increased, and we created more products. And then finally, we were able to, as they say, revolutionize the plastic industry by creating these products in the lab. And to remember it like in an easy way, you remember the crude oil, you remember the natural base, right? So polyethylene, which they say actually is for these single-use plastics that we use around, is essentially coming from ethane and propane, which is a product of the same distillation column that we saw. These are the products that you get, and then you combine them to form ethylene, and then to form that poly, you combine all of those ethylene and propane gases to form polypropylene, and then a combination of this is sort of polyethylene, which now comes in a lot of these. So this is what, and some of you saw it in the packages. So this is what the raw material for plastic looks like. It looks like these granules that you can use to manufacture as many products, byproducts as you can. This is not and is very important because it will tell you how from drilling down to creating, to forming these pellets and making different products. It's not just those three processes. So although they will show you just this, telling, this is how you make polyethylene, but it also involves like catalyst addition, additive addition. So a lot of these are carcinogenic in nature. We talked about BPA or dioxins. There are additives in the plastic that essentially come in this process eventually then in the product. So it's not just converting ethylene to polyethylene, it's actually adding a lot of catalysts and additives to it as well. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that it's not a 1 or 2 step process. And of course, this is also evolving. Again, these figures kind of change depending on who's reporting it, but and also like depending on where the plastic is coming from, but because WWF is a more reliable source, I generally use this picture, only to tell that it's not, this plastic is going to be around generations after we're around, and maybe thousands of years after we're around. So everything we've left on the planet today is going to be around for thousands of years. So this 20 years actually is for the plastic to be divided into smaller pieces. It's not for the plastic to be completely broken down. That process still takes thousands of years because we're just learning about microplastic. We don't even know what happens to microplastic and how we can control it or take it off the environment. Now, how many of you, when you buy a plastic product, whether that's your shampoo or water bottle, and because I've got juice, maybe I can ask Afa to look at the bottom of the bottle and see which of these signs you see on your water bottle, because every product that you buy is supposed to give you this information, which is basically telling you what type of plastic you're using. So can you tell us which particular code is on that? Yeah, but then you should see, okay, I know it's PET, because I know it's PET, which is 1, but you should see if that is indeed to me. Let's stop telling you where it is. Maybe for PET it is a little too obvious. It just says recyclable, but generally in all the plastic products it tells you what what this is made of, but because I know it's PET, maybe like it's a given, so they don't put it anymore. So all of your drinking water bottles are PET.
This is better.
That's PET as well, yeah. And then a lot of other products will have these signs. And these signs were gently created to, I think, take our attention away from the fact that, you know, just as a sign of the possibility of recycling them. Of course, it's on the type as well, but also if you look at it, they say, okay, these can be commonly recycled, and then these are almost never recycled. So some of these, they're of course like the polyethylene or the high density and low density polyethylene or polyvinyl chloride or polypropylene and polystyrene. Polystyrene, which you often see in the teas that you drink, the styrofoam is essentially this. But this particular image is trying to tell you that, you know, whether they're recyclable or not, and also what are some of the common products in which it is found. It is not restricted to just this. There are bags that are made of polypropylene as well, and you know we'll look at how that makes a difference for the environment. Beham, you had a point? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information, but I do want to give you both sides of the stories. For example, you will go to packages on Saturday, and this is what they'll tell you, right? It's a good barrier. It stops gas. It stops moisture from coming in. It makes sure that the food is stored for a long period of time. So those are like the selling points of this. And also, you'll listen a lot of solvent when you go to the factory for the visit. So what does it mean when they say, you know, it stops the solvents from entering the food, and why that is important? Something that I like to share is how they say mostly recycled. These bottles will always have the sign of recyclable, but recyclable never means it is eventually going to be recycled. So a lot of these plastic products eventually end up being burned in brick kilns, for example, in Pakistan, or into the landfills. Sometimes their quality isn't because you have to wash them, sort them, segregate them, and then put them into a machine that will extrude it and make those pellets from that plastic again for it to be converted into a newer product. That process is not very efficient in many places. And also just I think in terms of diversity, so I've given more explanation of these in the slide notes, and I hope you'll get through it, but just look at the strengths that they mention in the product. So polyethylene has several combinations. So this is a little denser and has high density. And if you look at the bottles that you use, you will see between the packaging, for example, a shampoo versus a PET bottle, what is a higher dense or high density plastic bottle going to look like. And again, it says commonly recycled. I do not know, but if you look at the properties, it says, you know, a perfect barrier to moisture. Some of them are permeable and allow gases to come in, which is also important. So a lot of these properties then decide the application of that plastic. And if you look at it, like some of them, so for example, PET is often used for food. This one says that about PET, you would often read how it leaches a lot of additives into the water. So for example, they'll ask you not to leave your PET water bottle in front of sun for a long time in your car because it will allow for the additives to leach into the water. So like that's something that you read in the articles a lot. This one, on the other hand, is telling you it does not transmit chemicals, but it's also saying that it's not safe for reuse. So, you know, these generally, like what kind of information is given to you, you have to read the whole description of it to make sure like why they're saying what they're saying. And I think all of this is written with a very consumer focused note. So again, like your assignment one of who is writing this and why they're writing what they're writing. Of course, they're writing it because they want to sell their products. So you've seen a lot of PVC pipes around, And if you also look at it, it generally says, it has excellent transparency. Just look at the descriptions. And then sometimes recycled means rarely recycled, and then should not come in contact with the items. And we know a lot of this is like directly accessible to kids, so they end up chewing it almost all the time. And then low density polyethylene, which is category 4. Again, sometimes recycled. If you look at the flexibility and durability, they say, okay, they have certain applications. So you would see this happening in the kitchen and in lab and other products. I think we see a lot of these. Their properties are not any different from the others. Transparent, has a low melting point, stable electrical properties, good moisture barrier. All of these things you'll also notice a lot when you go to packages and they talk about some of the products that you see on shelf. And then polypropylene. So if you are the biologists here, you're eventually going to be working in the lab and you'll see a lot of this, except for this. This is all polypropylene, so it's not polyethylene. And then a lot of, I think, bottle caps are polypropylene as well. And again, of course, you would need them because they're strong, they're flexible, they have higher melting point. You want them to resist higher temperatures. And then that means that you will use them in products that are important. Then comes polystyrene. We've seen it a lot our entire life in packaging, in single-use food item, but of course, it tells you it's brittle and commonly recycled, but it's always like recyclable, recycled, but. So when you come to, I think the reason why I mentioned what all the strengths, and then this is, they're not telling you it's hard to recycle it, it's not going to be recycled. They're making it sound as if there's still a possibility to recycle it. So I think just look at the way information is being transmitted to you. And others is essentially dozen other types of plastic that have been created, oftentimes very useful. So for example, I'm really fond of Teflon, this product that you see over frying pans, etc., which allows for non-stickiness. Some of these products are really useful because they then save water when you're washing it by making sure that it's non-sticky. But there are like so many other types, both good and bad, which are also supremely difficult to recycle. Yes, Roshan. Thank you for mentioning that. So most of these chemicals are actually really toxic in nature, and Teflon and the process of creating that chemical is utensils. Yeah. And then there are two ways to look at it, right? So for example, I'm looking at it completely from the fact that otherwise I remember how utensils took a lot of water for it to be washed. With a non-stick, it's super efficient. And although it doesn't come off that easily, but that litter that we're going to release into the environment, as well as the production process in itself, is toxic for the environment. And that isn't just Teflon, that's literally every plastic product that we've seen, and every other plastic product that we'll not be talking about. And then, have been put in this general category of others, which is again generalizing it to a scale that we shouldn't be generalizing. So that's that. But thank you for mentioning it, Ms. Abha.
Why is this information not readily made available to the users, for the consumers? Because like we said about it, it's barely readable.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to get reduction of this? Because there are specific applications that you can find out what data this is.
Yeah, true. And then there are people who never, of course, who are never directly concerned about it. So they never know in their entire lifetimes that they've been using this many types of plastic, and every type of plastic has a hazard, but also has a use. So, I'm not brushing off the uses. Of course, it has a lot of uses in various industries that are important for our world to operate. But this information, I don't know what the agenda of not giving a lot of information to people people is. Because I think the more people learn and the more people are educated, the more they'll ask. For example, I'll now be asking anywhere that I buy products from to make the packaging environment friendly. And that is an additional burden to them. So this comes easily. So when you go to factories, you'll see that where they use these polyethylene, they also look at the complexity, because oftentimes it's not just one type. They are blending 3-4 types. So they will tell you we're blending, I think they're blending LDPE, HDPE, and E to form that plastic, which you will see when you go to packages. Actually, you've already seen it, right? So that wasn't just one kind of plastic. So now you have to find, when it's recycled, you have to find a use for it where this will be converted into a byproduct. Otherwise, it's not, I don't know where it will go in the environment or what its use will be. So I think this information is hidden from user to make their lives easy. Because of course, a lot of money, research money, advertisement money has gone into this to make you realize that this is the best that you're going to get. And I often tell people when I was young, Tetra Pak packaging was sold as like the biggest intervention of our age, because now you have several barriers for milk to be stored and transported to the users, and all kind of fancy advertisements used to come on TV, and you used to, wow, like look at the kind of research and all of these thin layers to come together to make sure that there are many barriers for things to enter milk and ensure that the milk has a longer shelf life. But then the same is now the biggest environmental nuisance. So how do you separate these layers from one another and make sure that all of them get recycled? So now packaging is changing entirely to recycling friendly. Does anyone have any questions? Because I know I've been doing a lot of talking so far. Yeah. तो वो particular company बंद है, पर आपके घरों में जो products हैं क्या उनमें टेफ्लॉन So what about the products that we have in our household? Or that are made of it? Okay, so maybe it would be worth investigating, has Teflon been replaced? Because the product that I buy definitely has Teflon in it. And I can check again. Yeah, so that's a good point. So for example, because of persistent organic pollutants are banned, a lot of persistent organic pollutants are banned, DDT included, but it is allowed in Pakistan because Pakistan has a lot of malaria. But actually what that means is a lot of waste DDT from other developed countries can find its way to Pakistan. So it's okay if we die because we're lesser than human beings, but it's not healthy for another country. So I think it depends on country to country. These industries might have stopped operating elsewhere, but they might still be operating in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan because of oil, where the jump there of the world. Yes.
My understanding is that was never reported to the EPA as a so now it's more regulated rather than being
Yeah, so I think it comes back to the fact that that particular industry in that particular locality might be banned, which is a brilliant success story that you can stop these companies from operating in your neighborhood if they're not controlling the pollutant. But that doesn't mean that we put a stop, because fighting these is like fighting the biggest guys in power, and that's literally impossible because the entire value chain is plastic, right? From taking it off the field to even like, for example, a lot of these tunnel and greenhouses that use plastic now. Plastic is a part of every process, from food production to packaging to our day-to-day lives. And it's difficult to just phase it out like that. You have a point. I can, or maybe I can comment.
amount of the product that it's like
Okay, that is a good question. So do we not have anyone monitoring mechanism or quarantine, for example? For example, if a seed comes to Pakistan, it has to go through, let's say a genetically modified seed comes to Pakistan, it has to go through a quarantine period where it's tested, where we know that it's suitable for our soil, our environment, it's not going to damage something. Same goes, for example, for animal species that are introduced. We have to make sure that they're non-invasive, that they do not damage the environment, because oftentimes that cause a problem. Same goes for drugs. So if drugs are discovered and they're tested on mice, then we have to make sure that there is a human population on which it is sampled. And then give it. So there are mechanisms to test whether it's good for the environment or not. But a lot of these bad outcomes only come 2 decades after a product was introduced, or 3 decades after a product was introduced. So a lot of the insecticides like dieldrin, etc., they were banned 20, 30, 40 years down the line because initially it didn't have any impact. It was that slow exposure, bioaccumulation that eventually caused for the impact. So there are regulatory mechanisms, there are monitoring mechanisms, but I think we're always in a hurry to do more and do good. And oftentimes it takes us a while to find that they're actually not very good for environment. Yes. Yeah.
I'm only curious, ultimately, basically posing this problem. Why not if there's change?
Yes. So I think it's difficult because where do you start the process of switching? Do you start with educating the people that this is not good for your health, for the health of your children, for the environment, for the future in general, for biodiversity, etc. Education alone has not been enough, and I keep saying this. I've gone to communities, I've gone door to door, and I've told people that this is not good. I've seen the same people use plastic because it has created a culture of convenience. It's just so convenient to go to a shop and forget your cloth bag at home because it doesn't cost you anything. If it costed me 50 rupees, I would carry it in my dupatta and make sure that I don't.
That's why people have started carrying their bags now because when you go to school, they ask you if you need a bag with the charge.
Yeah.
Even if they charge like 2 rupees, people are
Yeah. So incentives have to be given for people to stop using plastic, and incentives also have to be given for them to start using reusable bags. And this has to be beyond its impact on the environment because a lot of people do not care. They say we're going to die in 50 years. I don't care.
was the reusable bags. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah,
You just mentioned that they
percentage of plastic. Yeah.
if the change was made, bags that could be 1.1 that are actually not like making a change was a big step to
Yeah.
begin with and implementing it.
Yeah, so I think it comes back to cost. Plastic is cheap. And that blend and that product is cheap. A cloth bag is probably going to cost you what, 100 rupees? Or maybe if they subsidize it, 70, 80 rupees. But that bag is only going to cost you 10 rupees. That costs you 10 rupees. So I think it eventually comes down to cost, which is why then environmental economics is really important. Like you have to give people the incentive. Like people are not going to change because it's morally right for them to change. People are only going to change if there's a polluter pay mechanism, if there's an incentive for, like if I know that if I bring my own coffee cup to the cafe, my 10th coffee is going to be free, and I'm a heavy coffee drinker, like I have to have my cup of coffee every day. For me, that's an incentive. Like I will bring my mug with me every the 9 times just to get that 10th time free coffee. So those incentives I think have to be built, and they have to be beyond, unfortunately, education and morality scale because we have educated people and it hasn't made a huge difference. So let's quickly look at the accumulation of plastic. So like Asad said, And by the way, I don't think I've made a reference, but this is, I think, an Oxford-based website that was launched. It essentially has brought all the data that's available online into one space, and it helps us visualize a lot of data. So I use a lot of graphs from here because you just go to our world in data and play with the numbers, and then it gives you some of these graphs. So because some of these plastic products were discovered or created in the labs around this time, even if they were natural, like they were brought into industry and mass produced around this time, just look at how the number has increased and is still increasing. And that is a problem. We are creating this new environment that has a product that wasn't essentially a part in. And we're talking about 7 billion tons. And that's a lot, and probably even more right now. And you guys keep talking about recycling and recyclable. Most of the waste is plastic waste is discarded, and only a small amount is incinerated, which means it's burnt at a very high temperature and it's reduced in volume. But I think Zan talked about the emissions from here, which are also really, really bad for the environment. So all of these processes also have consequences on the environment as well. But back to recycling, how it is sold to us that recycling is the solution, when essentially we're not doing anything about it. But let's go back to why we needed to go to packages and why it was important for us to go to one of these factories when we talk about plastic pollution. It's because they are the biggest contributors to plastic pollution if we look at the industry sector. Of course, all the other industries are as well, but packaging is the major contributor. And a lot of these, for example, small sachets, never recyclable. They can't be recycled because of the way that they're being created. But because of consumer demand, we have to create these one-time, two-time cheap products so that their consumer market just keeps growing rather than shrinking. So another reason for you to look at this more carefully. And most of the plastic we use is single-use plastic. And this figure changes. I won't be too adamant with the figure, but most of the plastic that we generally use, and look at your life as well, of how much plastic you use and what percentage of that plastic is single-use plastic that you only use and then discard. So with respect to, for example, PTC, you and I included, we do use single-use plastic. But a lot of us also say that Pakistan is a poor country, we do not pollute the environment, but we pay the price for the pollution, climate change impacts us, and blah, blah, blah. That's not always true. I think sometimes, depending on how we look at the problem, and even though it was created for Indonesia, if you look at where most plastic is entering in the world, we are in the top 20 countries. So no matter how small our contribution, we are in the top 20 countries in the world that is contributing to plastic pollution in the ocean. So to also have a way for us to go beyond, but we're not really the biggest contributors to pollution. Where I think the world has now become plastisphere. Like I said, there's not a single place, there's not a single space where you do not find plastic. And recently, a lot of documentaries have come out as well. But something that was really awakening for me was this. And if you get time, do go and look up Chris Jordan's maybe trailer of this film of how again they mistake plastic as their food and then eat it. And in the box, this is what you find. Look at that image in China. And then, of course, plastic pollution, and then some of these nets that have been found living in the oceans about.
Yeah, can you go back to the previous slide?
We can go back to the previous slide.
So most of the countries on the list are developing countries, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the developed countries are mostly the developed countries are conducting these surveys of the plastic because they have the luxury to do that because they have developed, and now they are implementing rules and this kind of stuff on the developing countries. But in the developing countries, I think we kind of going through the same thing that they went through, but they just went through it earlier, where there was no awareness, and now they're just. Can I guess it?
Yeah, I agree. So Afaq is saying that essentially like this is the process that the developed world has gone through already. So they now have recycling units, they have mechanisms to handle their waste better, which is why they're not in the list. Otherwise, they used to be in the list way before we were, which is also true. But then there's also another dark side to it, which is that a lot of the plastic, even the developed world says it's recyclable and they segregate it, but eventually it is transported to our countries. So Malaysia has been the biggest receiver of plastic. All of that recycled plastic that is sorted in the developed world comes and is sold to some countries. I thought Pakistan, it wasn't the case with Pakistan, but unfortunately Pakistan is importing not only new plastics or from these companies, but also waste plastic. So even that plastic is also ending up in our homes, which is why we then become another big party to the pollution. Maybe I can take your comment first. Yeah. So now, like because they have those emission cuts, their industries are essentially the industries that are based, like I said, in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and some of these 4 countries. We produce, so like a lot of their products, Zara, all of these big brands included, all the clothes goes from mostly Bangladesh now because that's the cheapest labor and industry these days. Yes, that's it. And then
I think this way point, I agree with the first point. And that's why like all the big brands like Nike or Nike companies are making their companies like overseas.
Yeah.
Big production.
Yeah, and remember like we used to take pride in the fact that football is being made in Pakistan. What are those people paid in money, like cents, like pennies? And then what is the overall money that Pakistan gets out of it? And look at how big the football industry or that sports industry in general is and how much revenue it generates for them. And we're just happy with the fact that we be the biggest exporters or our football was used in the world. But if you look at the damage, all the pollution is here. People are underpaid, people are poor, and then that's like the biggest area of revenue economy for some people. So yeah, if you do not, if I can hold points there for a minute and quickly jump, because I always put too much information on the slides. I will not go here. I just wanted to highlight that I'm already here, but I just wanted to highlight the impacts that this has not only on our body, and some of you already talked about it, have talked about it in the packets. It's soil pollution, air pollution, water pollution, which I think most of you have already mentioned, but you also mentioned how there are various dysfunctions in the human body because organs are impacted either by the chemicals that is leached or by, for example, microplastics themselves. So you often, okay, now this brings me to the quiz. A lot of you have written in the quiz that the 3 principles of sustainability are reduce, reuse, recycle. When did I teach you that? I didn't even mention it in the lesson. We just invented the 3 principles of sustainability. In your book, and in a lot of lectures, I outlined that it was neutral recycling, biodiversity, and the solar radiation, so the energy. But thank you for thinking out of the box. But what I wanted to tell you is, back to the point of recycling. It needs sorting, washing, spreading, classification, and then excluding. None of that is practically happening in some of our countries. But the 3 R's are not 3 R's anymore. And this is one of my favorite, because for a lot of people it starts with refuse, but this one also says rethink. So it's no longer 3 R's of sustainability. It is, rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, refurbish, repair, repurpose, and then recycle. So what was initially reduced, reuse, recycle, this is how it's being taught to people around that we need to add more R's and add more thought process and add more thinking and options before we finally get to recycling. And after 4 or 5 times of recycling, this is going to end up in a landfill anyway. I'll come back to that. Just give me a second. oh, this is like another big area. And if we jump here, then we'll be lost. But maybe I can quickly talk about this. Because plastic is a part of the solid waste, and solid waste is one of the biggest problems of the environment. I put this here because it's also related to these dump sites. They are, even if it's like a box outside of your home, that area can serve, or even a water body, stagnant water body, that area can serve as a breeding ground for some of these flies who then have impact on the body. So it's kind of looking at how, again, the solid waste, which is related to plastic pollution, is also related to the biosphere, which is also related to the health. So everything is super complicated. So do not look at solid waste as just solid waste, but solid waste is a contributor to pollutant in the hydrosphere, in the lithosphere, in the atmosphere, and then by changing these in your body, in our health, human health kind of thing. So everything that's not liquid waste, of course, is solid waste. But essentially, what I wanted to highlight in this is there are different sources of solid waste, and they have different impacts as well. And I've outlined it, and I'm sure you'll look at it. But if you think of this categorization, which is residential, industrial, commercial, institutional, and construction, municipal, manufacturing, agriculture, in a lot of these, the dominant waste will very often be plastic. And I just like to do a survey in general when I'm traveling by, to a new city, to a new village. Wherever you go, wherever you cross a dump site, even if it's like a smaller dump site outside of a street, plastic is dominating it. And again, in order to tackle the pollution, we have to then go back to solid waste and find out where the source is, and find out what is generated, and find out what are the different percentages, and find out how we can control each, plastic included, in order to control plastic pollution. So plastic pollution control isn't just about banning single-use plastic, or giving educational events. Plastic pollution control often is going back to your city's plan and then looking at the solid waste management of your city. So just like a zoomed out version before you walk out of the class, that it's not as simple as, oh, here's a legislation that's going to help reduce plastic pollution, but also, looking at it. So I don't know if this is important right now. We can talk about it later as well, maybe in the pollution control techniques. I'll leave it there. But maybe because I talked about incineration and recycling and landfill, I can just tell you that, for example, back to the point that Zen made, that when you burn plastic, some of these combustibles, they do release these toxic elements, because these toxic elements are part of them. Composting is something that was really a highlight last year as well. So if you segregate your solid waste such that the food is separated from the non-biodegradables and is converted into compost, you have already reduced the waste load on your city solid waste management system. So the trucks that are coming in now do not have to take tons and tons of food waste along with the other waste. So that process also has to be efficient, but a lot of trucks are sent to different areas to collect waste, and that also has emissions. But when we studied solid waste management, it was finding the perfect route, finding the perfect time, making sure that it's not a nuisance for the public, covering it properly, making sure that there are no leaks in the system, dumping it to a dump site that is away from aquifers or groundwater, where the groundwater level isn't too high, to make sure that these do not contaminate our soil and underground water bodies. So that composting definitely is a highlight of how you can dispose, because it essentially brings the organic matter back to the soil. So it converts it back to the conditioner that the soil otherwise has. We've talked about recycling a lot, and landfill practically is a designed compartment where all of your waste goes in, is compressed, is covered, to make sure that all of those issues that we're talking about disease transmission, about spread, of the waste in the environment is controlled. And again, we can talk about it in the pollution control techniques rather than today. Okay. Okay. So this is the last slide, and then maybe we have to come back to you guys. So we've already talked about microplastic. What is bioplastic or biodegradable plastic? And also, what do you think is biodegradation? A new hand. Sorry. A new hand, sorry. A new hand, sorry. So you can stay here all night, all day long, but I want someone who hasn't spoken in the class to speak. Now, if you're not intrigued about solid waste in your environment, then I don't know. Maybe I need a new vaccine that can make you up from not caring about environment. Okay, let's just sit and take a break until a new hand. No? Oh my God, you guys. Shifa, I'm going to call you.
Biodegradable really means able to use in the national environment.
The biota or the life is in the natural. Yes. So you have, so in the next class, hopefully, we will look at the role of microorganisms in the environment. We'll also talk about microplastic, plastic in general, and degradation of some of these components that we say are really, really, really bad for the environment. Yeah, the bioplastic, I think I can start explaining it. Bioplastic is the plastic that is sourced from biological material. So for example, polylactic acid or PLA is a bio-based plastic. So you extract these. And now if you see a lot of bottles, they will give you information, maybe not in Pakistan, but abroad, they tell you 50% of this is virgin plastic, 30% of this is recycled plastic, of course, not Pakistan, but countries that are trying to be more responsible. And then they will say that 30% of this plastic is bioplastic. Just to try to let you know that we are trying to be more responsible by not extracting virgin plastic, because we know how long that cycle is from finding a crude oil to then getting these plastic pellets. They're essentially making sure that you just take these PLA or other components out of waste food and then add it into the plastic value chains that are now there. But here's the problem with one of these things. So I think I said this to you already. The biodegradable plastic that is given to you in PTC is polyethylene. But they're telling you, maybe, I don't know if they're claiming that it is bio-based, but they're definitely claiming that it's biodegradable, right? So again, like looking back at the information that is being given to you. So look at all that detail that is laid out in the plastic. What does the plastic say? If anyone remembers, like what's the information that's given on the plastic that you take from these? Yeah, I think it says something along the lines of it's biodegradable and it's good for the environment. So there's the full serum enrichment on it. Yes, right now. Yeah, so you have that reduce, reuse, recycle, the three principles of sustainability for Simon of 2021.
I also believe if the symbol is made, it can be recycled 1 or 2 times.
Yeah, so the symbol sort of tells you that this is recyclable as well. Yes, Parveen.
प्लास्टिक बैग्स हैं वो आप ठीक है दूसरी बार यूज कर लेंगे बट लेकिन जो हमारे सारे प्रोडक्ट्स हैं कॉस्मेटिक शैम्पू हमारा वाली पानी जो
They are single
ये
use.
सब कुछ सिंगल कब हमारा चाहिए तो दोबारा
But there are, impossible kuch bhi nahi hai. There are societies that are now in their shopping malls, they have refill centers. So you take the same shopping shampoo bottle and you refill it. You take the same box of detergent and you refill it. So there are those. And again, where is that supply driven from the consumers making the noise that we no longer want to buy this product in a new plastic bag every single time. अब जब तक उस लेवल की awareness यहाँ पर नहीं आएगी, I don't think anyone will be bothered in this country. In fact, like I have, and I said this last time as well, every single time that I go to a sabzi wala, a fruit wala, even if it's in the biggest of malls, now things are changing because it's banned in some places. They package for you in 2 plastic bags instead of 1.
Yes.
When you have your own bag and you're telling them, but I have my own bag, put it here, and they're like, no, bag kharab ho jayega. And then it's like, okay, if you want to give me that in a plastic bag, at least use just 1 plastic bag, not 2, but you need another plastic bag for it. It's because it doesn't cost them anything. And then it doesn't cost me anything. And then that, I don't know, I think it's probably next to impossible to replace anytime soon. But then these case studies give us hope that there are some of these outlets that are trying to do it. I remember when plastic bag was banned in Islamabad, there was a whole documentary made by people here. एक बंदी कह रही थी कि आप सोचें मुझे हाथ में लेके जाना पड़ता है, like ये दूध की का जो डब्बा है मुझे हाथ में लेके जाना पड़ता है. हाँ, exactly. So that documentary essentially was telling कि inconvenience है कि लोगों को हाथ में पकड़ के, and then someone was complaining कि आप हमें paper bags देते हैं, paper bags तो फट जाते हैं, हमारा ये हो जाता है, तो आपको नहीं पता कितनी inconvenience से cause है. There was like a whole documentary. I also want to see why people are so afraid of switching. And for me, I think because my grandparents, for example, haven't used plastic at all. We have this culture of using cloth parchments that is tied together and turned into a carrier that can be carried, which was done until maybe my parents' generation, but the current generation doesn't do it. They just use plastic bags, right? So yeah, if you do not have any comments, questions, or quiz assignments, I think we're good to go.
I have a question. If plastic has only been around for 50 years, how do we know that it will be